I enjoyed my youth. Why, now that I'm 35, so the good men I rejected in my 20s no longer want to date me? I am sitting at a corner table in the most exclusive lounge in the city, swirling a glass of 2015 Cabernet that costs more than most people's car payments. The lighting here is calibrated to make everyone look like $1 million, which is fitting because I've worked harder than anyone in this room to earn my place at the top. I just got promoted to Senior Director of Operations, a title that effectively validates every late night and every calculated sacrifice I've made over the last decade. My 20s weren't wasted on messy emotions or finding myself in some dead-end relationship. They were spent traveling the globe, building an empire, and optimizing every single facet of my life. I am the finished product, the high-performance machine that every man claims to want but few actually have the stamina to pursue. Naturally, having reached this summit, I decided it was finally time to collect on the good guys I strategically put on the back burner years ago. People like Mark were always part of the long-term plan, even if they didn't realize it at the time. Back in college, Mark was absolutely obsessed with me, following me around like a loyal puppy while I was busy networking and establishing my trajectory. He was undeniably kind and stable, but frankly, he was a bit too entry-level for the high-octane life I was leading back then. I remember telling him with perfect clarity that he needed to go out and find himself, and that maybe we'd talk when he actually had more to offer a woman of my caliber. It was a favor, really, giving him the motivation to improve so that he might one day be worthy of the version of me I was currently building. I expected him to take that advice as the blueprint for his future, essentially working in the background until I was ready to integrate him into my schedule. Well, I saw him tonight across the lounge, and I must say my assessment of his potential was spot on. He looks incredible, sharper, wealthier, and radiating the kind of calm masculine authority that I now require in a partner to match my own success. It was like seeing a seed I planted years ago finally reach its peak harvest season, and I felt a sense of pride in my own foresight. I walked up to him with total confidence, essentially presenting him with the win he'd been waiting over a decade to achieve. I didn't beat around the bush because people at our level don't have time for games. I simply explained that I was finally ready to give him the chance he had always wanted. I even made sure to mention my new promotion to show him I was bringing equal value to the table, ensuring he knew this was a partnership of equals. I fully expected a look of profound gratitude or perhaps a bit of stunned silence as he realized his patience had finally paid off. Instead, he looked at me with this bizarre detached expression, like I was a telemarketer calling during his private dinner. It was incredibly jarring to see someone I had basically saved for later act as if I were an interruption rather than an opportunity. He didn't even stand up or offer me a seat, which I found to be a massive lapse in basic social etiquette for someone in his position. He just leaned back, took a measured sip of his drink, and let a silence hang between us that felt entirely unnecessary. I could tell he was trying to process the magnitude of the offer, but his lack of immediate enthusiasm was starting to border on disrespectful. "Claire, it's been 12 years, he said, his voice flat and devoid of the adoration I remembered. I'm not a placeholder." I was momentarily stunned by the sheer lack of logic in that statement, as if the passage of time somehow diminished the quality of the asset being offered. I tried to explain the objective reality of the situation, that we are both peak assets now, and that any previous delays were simply part of the maturation process for this deal. In any other professional or social context, waiting for a high-value opportunity is considered a sign of wisdom, not an insult. But Mark just smiled tightly, a gesture that felt more like a dismissal than a greeting, and stood up without another word. He walked away toward a group of people without even asking for my number or acknowledging the olive branch I had just extended. It's clearly a glitch in the system, a temporary lapse in judgment caused by his own lingering insecurities from our college days. He's obviously trying to play hard to get to punish me for the wait, which is incredibly immature for a man of his age and status. He wants to feel like he's the one in control now, using silence as a weapon because he doesn't know how to handle a woman who knows her own worth. It's a classic defensive mechanism, pretending he's moved on just to see if I'll chase him, which is a game I don't typically play. He thinks he's teaching me a lesson, but all he's doing is delaying the inevitable realization that we are the only logical choice for each other. I'm not even angry. I'm just disappointed that he's choosing to be so petty about a timeline that worked out in everyone's favor. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, wait, so you literally treated this guy like a stock option for 12 years and now you're mad the contract expired? You don't optimize people, Claire. You ignore them until you're bored. He's not a peak asset. He's a human being who found someone who didn't put him in a drawer for a decade. Ops reply. High-value dating requires objective metrics, whether you like it or not. Mark is clearly letting his emotions cloud a perfectly rational partnership opportunity. I'm offering a merger of two successful lives, not a college fling. Anonymous user 2 says, do you honestly think a man stays on a loading screen for 12 years while you build your empire? The ego it takes to think you can just walk back in and claim him like a lost umbrella is actually breathtaking. Ops reply. Quality doesn't change just because time passes. If he was interested then, the fact that I'm even more successful now should only increase that interest unless he's intimidated by my growth. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and I've had some time to reflect on why Mark's initial reaction was so emotionally stunted. I realized that if he wanted to act professional and cold at the lounge, I should meet him on a platform where that kind of behavior is actually appropriate. I decided to fix Mark's attitude problem by sending him a formal, well-structured LinkedIn message that outlined exactly why a partnership makes sense at this stage of our lives. I didn't want any room for misinterpretation or emotional outbursts, so I laid out a comparative analysis of our current lifestyles, career trajectories, and social standings. It was a perfectly reasoned argument that highlighted the synergy we would have as a power couple in this city. I even attached a brief summary of my recent professional achievements to remind him that I am not the same girl from college, but a high-level executive. It was the most efficient way to communicate. Yet he didn't even have the courtesy to send a brief acknowledgement or a let's discuss this further note. I saw that he viewed my profile almost immediately, so I know the message was received and processed. Yet the silence continues. This is exactly the kind of passive-aggressive behavior that stalls progress in any high-stakes negotiation. And I'm frankly surprised he's reached his current position with such poor communication skills. Now, my sister is calling me delusional and obsessive because she's heard through the grapevine that Mark is apparently seeing someone else. I told her that her perspective is limited by her own mediocre relationship standards and that I don't care about some temporary distraction he might be using to pass the time. Until I see a ring on someone's finger, he's just diversifying his options while he waits for the courage to accept my offer. I am the primary investment he's trying to forget he wanted, and these little side projects he's dating are just placeholders for the real thing. I've decided that if he won't engage with me in a professional digital space, I will have to show up at his gym tomorrow morning. It's one of those ultra-exclusive athletic clubs where I also have a membership, so it's not as if I'm going out of my way to find him. If he sees me in my element, focused, fit, and looking better than any 20-something, he might be testing the contract will finally click back into place in his mind. He needs a visual reminder of what he's passing up, and a LinkedIn message, however well drafted, can't capture my physical presence. It's all about reinforcing the brand and making sure he understands that I am the only one who can truly match his energy. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, a LinkedIn message? Are you for real? I guarantee he's already screenshotted that comparative analysis and sent it to every group chat he's in. You're not a primary investment. You're a LinkedIn lunatic. Ops reply. Professionals use LinkedIn for all high-stakes negotiations and networking. If Mark can't handle a structured proposal, that says more about his lack of maturity than my methods. Anonymous user 2 says, this is like a CEO trying to buy a company that already went bankrupt and was liquidated years ago. Mark moved on, Claire. You're trying to buy shares in a ghost. Ops reply, I am prime merger material and any man with a brain would see that. Mark is clearly just intimidated by the fact that I've surpassed the version of me he used to know. Update 2. It's been 1 week since my last update, and I can say with certainty that some people are simply allergic to their own success. The gym encounter was a complete disaster, but not for the reasons any rational person would think. It was entirely due to Mark's flair for the dramatic. I spotted him near the squat racks and approached him during his set, waiting for a natural break to continue our conversation from the lounge. I told him quite plainly that he was being unreasonably difficult. and that his continued silence was a direct breach of our shared history and the potential we have. I expected a bit of tension, but instead he actually laughed. Not a nice, appreciative laugh, but a condescending, "You're crazy" laugh that was incredibly insulting. It was the laugh of someone who has lost touch with reality and is choosing to mock the very person trying to help them. The situation devolved further when he signaled over his trainer, a generic guy who looked profoundly embarrassed to be caught in the middle of a private matter. Mark had the absolute nerve to tell the man that I was harassing him and that he needed to be left alone to finish his workout. Can you believe the audacity it takes to call a senior director of operations a harasser simply for attempting to resolve a communication breakdown? I am literally offering him the life he used to beg for on his knees, and he's treating me like a common nuisance. I stood my ground, of course, because I don't allow people to mischaracterize my intentions, but the trainer eventually asked me to move to a different area of the gym. It was a humiliating display of his own inability to handle a direct conversation, and it only confirmed that he's going through some sort of midlife ego crisis. Since he's clearly not in a state of mind to make rational decisions for himself, I've started reaching out to our old college friends to stage a bit of an intervention. I've sent out a few messages to the people who saw how much he adored me back then, asking them to talk some sense into him. They need to remind him of who I am and the sheer magnitude of what he's throwing away just to satisfy some petty grudge about the past. I'm not letting him cancel our potential just because he's having a temporary moment of weakness and wants to pretend he's above the plan I've set for us. My friends seem a bit hesitant, which I attribute to their own lack of ambition, but I know that once they see the logic of my position, they'll fall in line. I'm the architect of my life, and I won't let a few no's from an emotional man ruin a decade of careful planning. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "In what world is no a negotiation tactic? He literally told the trainer you were harassing him. That's not hard to get. That's a get away from me restraining order waiting to happen." Ops reply, "In high-level business, no is often just the beginning of a negotiation that the other party isn't prepared for. Mark is just using it poorly because he's stuck in his feelings." Anonymous user 2 says, "The main character energy here is reaching critical radioactive levels. You're involving college friends from a decade ago? You're the villain in everyone else's story, Claire." OP's reply, "I'm the main character of my life, as everyone should be. I won't settle for a supporting role in someone else's mediocrity just to make them feel comfortable." Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I finally decided it was time to execute my final offer to end this ridiculous stalemate. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Mark was attending a high-profile charity gala, the exact kind of sophisticated event where I naturally excel and command the room. I didn't hesitate. I bought a ticket immediately, which was another $1,000 down the drain for a cause I don't even care about, and wore the most aggressive, stunning dress I own. I spent hours preparing, ensuring every detail of my appearance was a testament to my status and my undeniable value as a partner. I waited until the cocktail hour when he was near the stage, surrounded by influential people, and I confronted him with the finality the situation required. I walked right up to him, ignored the woman he was standing with, and said, "Mark, stop the games. I'm here. I'm ready. Sign the dotted line." I literally held out my phone with a calendar invite already pulled up for what I called a consultation date to finally hammer out our future. I thought that by making it a formal event in his schedule, he would finally see that I was serious and that his little rebellion had reached its logical conclusion. The boomerang hit hard, but not in the way I anticipated. He didn't get angry, and he didn't even bother to look at the phone screen I was holding. He didn't even give me the satisfaction of a real argument, which is the height of cowardice when someone is trying to engage you in a serious life decision. Instead, he turned to the woman next to him, some third party who looked half my age and had none of my presence, and spoke to her as if I weren't even there. "This is why I stopped answering in 2014, he told her, his voice dripping with a pity that I found absolutely revolting. She thinks people are balance sheets, and she's still trying to audit a relationship that never started." Then, right there in front of the entire table of donors and executives, he announced that they were moving their wedding date up to next month. He used the very efficiency I pride myself on to announce his total commitment to someone else, effectively slapping me in the face with his own brand of logic. The whole table stared at me like I was some kind of malfunctioning robot, whispering behind their hands while I stood there with my calendar invite still open. The security staff eventually escorted me out for disturbing the peace, which is a gross exaggeration of a simple conversation, but I suppose they have to justify their paychecks. I was trying to protect my relevance and ensure that our partnership didn't fall through the cracks of his poor memory, but it backfired spectacularly. I ended up being the crazy ex story he tells to make his new insignificant wife laugh at dinner parties, which is a role I never agreed to play. I left that gala with my head high, of course, because I know my worth hasn't changed just because he's choosing a lower value option. But as I walked to my car, the silence of the street felt a lot heavier than it did when I was planning my empire all those years ago. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, a consultation date calendar invited a charity gala? I am dying. Did you include a Zoom link for the inevitable breakup too, or was that a separate operational expense? Ops reply, digital organization is a virtue, not a crime. If more people used tools like calendar invites to manage their personal lives, there would be much less confusion and heartbreak. Anonymous user 2 says, I had a guy try to rehire me as an ex after he got his MBA. He sounded just like you. It didn't work for him either because people aren't jobs you can quit and come back to. Ops reply, my case is fundamentally different because my ROI is objectively higher than whatever emotional connection Mark thinks he's found. He's making a poor financial decision with his life. Update 4. It's been 3 months since the gala, and the silence in my life has become a permanent resident that I didn't invite. I am sitting in my empty, perfectly decorated apartment, surrounded by the high-end furniture and art that I once thought defined my success. I got another massive bonus today for exceeding operational targets, but there was no one to call to celebrate. No one to even notice the extra zeros in my bank account. I opened a bottle of that same expensive Cabernet I had the night I first saw Mark again. But it tastes like vinegar now, sharp and bitter on my tongue. Mark got married yesterday. I saw the photos on a mutual friend's story for about 30 seconds before I realized I'd been blocked by almost everyone in our old circle. Looking at those pictures, Mark looking radiant and genuinely happy with a woman who looks like she's never heard the word optimization in her life. Something finally cracked. I spent a decade treating men like items on a shelf, convinced that if I just worked hard enough I could walk back into the store and pick the best one whenever I was done playing. I thought love was something you could audit and manage like a supply chain, ensuring that you only invested when the market was at its peak. I have the career, the wine, the title, and the status, but I am the only person in this room who thinks those things actually mean anything at the end of the day. All those metrics I used to justify my coldness toward Mark feel like lead weights now, dragging me down into a very expensive, very lonely hole. I'm still convinced deep down that Mark is making a catastrophic mistake by choosing emotion over the logic I offered him. But that conviction doesn't keep me warm at night. Being right about my value and my career hasn't translated into being wanted, and the realization is more painful than any rejection he could have voiced. I have everything I ever worked for, every single thing I told myself I needed to be happy. And it turns out that nobody wants to share it with me. I optimized my life so thoroughly that I managed to optimize the humanity right out of it, leaving me with a perfect empire and no one to rule it with. I'm the senior director of a very quiet, very empty world, and for the first time in 35 years I have no idea how to fix the glitch in my own heart.